which makes the locations much more unique. They're not a commodity location. So when you put all those together, it wasn't hard to come to the conclusion of retail. And there was really one other thing. Pension funds in those days, who even then had all the money, and by the time the 96, 97 rolled around, even in 94, all the big real estate companies that I was talking about that were going bankrupt, they all ended up being owned by pension funds sooner or later. Cadillac Fairview, Omers, Cambridge, the Case, Oxford eventually, Cadillac Fairview was teachers. Oxford eventually by Omers. It just happened because they were there, and they didn't play in the unenclosed shopping center sector. So that was the other reason. It was just, there was nobody there. It was all just a lot of individuals, like Murray Frum and Jerry Sprackman, and who, you could buy stuff from.
Well, fundamentally, you built the company by buying individuals' portfolios.
True.
You did it with the Sprackmans,
Yeah.
Fidani, Frum, Burnett, Oshawa Group, basically.
Don't mention Burnett's too much, do we? Some of those didn't work out too well.
Well, actually, that goes to the next question, basically. What was we started off amongst some other small REITs at the time.
Yeah.
There
were three that basically all started at once.
Okay, that would be Real Fund, ourselves, and CREIT?
Correct.
So what was the...
One that wasn't a REIT, which was CentreCorp.
CentreCorp.
It was around the same time as well.
So what was the transaction that actually differentiated RioCan? What was the move that you feel put us in a different league in terms of those, if we believe we're in a different league than at least CREIT and...
Well, we clearly ended up being in a different league because Real Fund doesn't exist anymore. CREIT were about 4 times their size, maybe 5 times, I don't know exactly. And CentreCorp ended up being the subject of a hostile takeover. It is now First Capital, which is Dory here? It's about a quarter our size. He got very insulted at a CIBC conference where I said to him, somebody asked me in the crowd, he said, would you buy First Capital? I said, sure. Be a nice tuck-in for us. He hasn't forgiven me for that. That was like a year ago. But
talking, he gets no respect, Ed.
Well, that's the point. That's his theme, and he gets no respect. But I would say what differentiated us, Fred, was that we paid a lot of... we understood number one, I'll compare ourselves to Real Fund first. We understood we were in the real estate business. Fred joined, he wasn't quite employee number 2, but he sort of feels like employee number 2. Joined us in April 95. By the end of 94, I figured, we had to be in retail. That's what we were going to do. And it didn't take me long to say, okay, we got to start being responsible for our own leasing, got to be responsible for our own destiny. I need somebody that understands the actual nuts and bolts of how, putting tenants in a place starts. And I was fortunate enough to have been introduced to Fred. And we actually, I'm sorry for telling funny stories, but we had a meeting to decide if, I could talk Fred into coming in, and he was employed elsewhere. And so he didn't want, to be known that he was going to meet me. I said, you know what? I got 2 really good baseball tickets. The Blue Jays are playing this Thursday at lunch. And, in those days, the Blue Jays were really good. There's going to be like 30,000, 40,000 people there. And everybody would be wearing a suit because that's who went to baseball games at Thursday at noon. It was suits. And there we were sitting there having a nice chat. I actually had 4 seats so we could sit the 2 in the middle, very private. And then we were on the Jumbotron. It wasn't I said, after we saw ourselves on the Jumbotron, I said, you may as well come now. I mean, the cat's out of the bag. So anyway, and Fred really gave us, and then we started to build a team from there, realizing, and we actually, because when we started, everything was outsourced. That was actually the business model. I wanted to outsource everything. And I realized that necessarily wasn't the right business model. And, we evolved into really being in the real estate business. And it was also that focus on retail. If you remember, Real Fund was diversified. CREIT was diversified. So you stay diversified. You never build up an expertise, in my opinion, in one area where you can come to dominate it. And thirdly, we were the first to become self-managed. Center Corp, who I mentioned, never became self-managed. The biggest issue in the hostile takeover was buying out the management's contract because it was externally managed. We did that. Actually, Freddie was already there. Did July 1995, within a year sort of after we started. I said, you know what? Everybody in the United States that's being successful is self-managed. You have to totally align management with the shareholders, with my mother, and you can't work at cross purposes. Without mentioning names, there are some REITs today that are still not self-managed, and if you look hard on them, they make a lot of mistakes. And if you look hard at the governance, somebody could say, it's hard when you're getting paid just for buying assets to maybe take the same care in picking those assets as when you're getting paid based on the performance of those assets afterwards.
You really don't want to mention them?
I won't mention. No, I won't mention. Tommy's a good friend of mine. It's a problem. It's a problem, and I think what we did is we figured out all those issues, and we're prepared to make the, I'll call them sacrifices. They don't look like sacrifices 15 years later. But I used to go out for breakfast with the CEO of Center Corp, who shall remain nameless in case somebody knows Peter Cohen here. And you get to a certain age, you don't give a shit. And, we used to go out for breakfast every couple of months to compare notes, and he used to yell at me because I make him look bad. I was getting a salary and getting some stock options, thank God. And he had this management contract, and people would compare him unfavorably with what we were doing at RioCan. And I think as a result of our figuring out those things, we became much more market acceptable, and we got better support as the next few years rolled by from the capital markets than really any of the other guys did. And that gave us the opportunity to do the one big deal that really, I think, was the step. I mean, all those deals you mentioned with Burnett, with Fromm, with Sprackman were stepping stones to get us a bit of a critical mass. But the deal that really got us to a new level and really starting out above all the other levels was a hostile takeover of one of the original three, a company called Real Fund. Diversified REIT. He made some, I thought, real errors in judgment. I had gone to law school with the poor guys, and him I really won't mention his name.
No, he was at LePage with both John and I.
Was he?
Yeah.
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 But he was a lawyer. He went to law school with me. Successful lawyer, eh? Okay. Well, anyway, and I went to see him, and I said, we should really put our two companies together. And he said, well, that can make some sense, Eddie, but who's going to be CEO? I said, well, I sort of thought me. And he didn't agree. Anyway,
I think his words were, but I like my job.
And they were his words. And I told him he'd find another job. John would hire him again. But anyway, it turned into it was quite an ugly battle. I mean, it played out very much in the newspapers. Newspapers like that kind of stuff. I learned to be a little more careful with what I say to reporters. The takeover battle got a little uglier after a reporter in an interview asked me, well, have you got jobs slotted for the various executives at Real Fund? I said, no. He said, no, you don't? I said, no. I haven't even thought about where I would put them, and I don't even know if I got a place for them. Headline, Sunshine to pink slip entire executive staff at Real Fund. That really made it real friendly after that. And but you know what? That because they were about the same size as RioCan was at the time, and that virtually doubled us in size. Can I give one more plug to CIBC? We were advised on that entire acquisition by CIBC. And it was David Mongeau. He was the M&A guy. He was terrific. And I think he made so much money from these guys, he now lives in Monaco, is it? Yeah.
He commutes to London.
Where we all should go one day and live. But anyway, I think that move then really differentiated from everybody else because at that point, we were bigger than everybody else. And I think, going back to where I started, we just kept working harder. Every year, RioCan goes away for 2 strategy sessions, really. One in the fall, where we really focus. It's 2 parts. We finalize our budget for the upcoming year, which actually the guys give you an idea how seriously we take it, it's now June. The budget process for 2012 has commenced. And in November, it's basically all finished before we take it into our board for approval. We have an offsite where we approve the budget as a group and figure out the strategies we got to employ to, number one, make sure we make that budget, both from a personnel, do we have the capabilities to actually do what we want to do? And, what do we have to do corporately in order to make sure we can achieve or better that budget? And we look at 1 and 2 year, and sometimes even 3 year, although we don't like to go that far out, sort of strategies, the way we see the business environment changing, the way we see the world changing, and what should RECAN be doing about it to either protect itself from those changes or to take advantage of those changes. And then we get together again in sort of late winter after our year-end financials are all finished and published, and that's our property offsite where it's getting harder, although high tech is helping, right? Well, the last one was good because we used to put books together. Our poor asset management people would spend I don't know how long, and it was getting to it was only 4 or 5 pages on each property, but when you get up to 300 centers, it's a lot of pages. And they were so big nobody could carry them on the flights, so we used to FedEx it down. One year it got hung up at customs, and we'd actually spend a couple of days and we'd go through virtually every property that we owned looking for challenges, problems we saw in the future, and quite frankly, more important, opportunities. What we did on Avenue Road with Tribute came out of a meeting like that. What we've done in a lot of places and what we're going to do over the next few years, hopefully, come out of meetings like that. And that's where we made a big decision back in '05 and said, you know what? Small town malls don't work for us. Hopefully they'll work for Primaris, but they don't work for us. And I think they were labeled money pits. We used to shovel in money and never got much income back. You had to shovel in money just to keep the income the same. And we did 2 strategies actually over 2 years, 04 and '05. Number one, we decided to focus our assets on the big 6 markets in Canada. That's where all the growth was, and that's where the tenants wanted to be. And number 2, to actually sell those malls. And we actually sold 10% of our portfolio in 2005. And we're never looked back on that. Took us a year or 2 to recover when you lose that amount of income, but we have a far better portfolio, and we call constantly. So, what question was I answering?
Transformative deal.
Hostile takeover, real fun.
Okay. And not that those properties
I
went,
do know.
sometimes
I know. You better just stop it.
And not those properties that went to Retrocom.
That was the latter part.
10%,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
when I stopped. The Retrocom did buy the bulk of those '05 portfolios. Yeah.
So we talked about your mom being a unit holder. Your father, like my father, was a builder.
Yeah.
And a successful one. And what valuable lesson did you learn from the old man? I mean, you always had that great quote about our business, which I love, which is worth repeating.
Yeah, no, it was a great quote. My father was starting to get sick. He passed away actually almost 15 years ago. And as we were just starting RECAN, he wasn't well, but he was all there. And I was trying to explain to him what I was doing at RECAN, and he really was having trouble understanding it, which meant I probably wasn't explaining it very well. And I think I finally explained it well. And he looked at me and says, "Oh," he says, "I think I understand it. People give you money, you buy real estate with it, you make a living from that, and you don't have to give them their money back." I said,